Hello, my name is John Bannon. I'm an attorney and philosopher. In today's video, I am going to explain how superdeterminism destroys Soren Kierkegaard. This video is what they failed to teach you in college philosophy class about the philosophy of Kierkegaard. When I talk about superdeterminism, I'm referring to a very unique, specific version of superdeterminism proven in 2020 by Swedish theoretical physicist Dr. Johan Hansen. His proof can be found in the peer reviewed physics journal, Physics Essays, volume 33, number 2, June of 2020. It begins on page 216 to 218, is entitled Bell's Theorem and its Tests, Proof that Nature is Superdeterministic, Not Random. So Dr. Hansen's version of superdeterminism says that we live in a predetermined static block universe without cause and effect in physics, or without physical causation or probabilistic causation. So I listed 5 points on the board of Kierkegaard's philosophy, and I'll show you how each of these central points of his philosophy are disproven using superdeterminism. So number 5, one is not a Christian simply by being born into this religion. However, under superdeterminism, everything that ever happens in the universe is predetermined to exist, and the past, present, and future are equally real, and all presently still existing in the block universe. So, from this, one can infer that God intended Christianity to be his true message to humanity because God predetermined Christianity to be the predominant world religion. Why would God make it the predominant world religion if it wasn't meant to tell us a truth from him? So, uh, Christianity is a predetermined religion, and it is also the predetermined predominant method of creating new Christians that you bring in the infants and baptize them or christen them into Christianity. So Christianity has only become the predominant world religion because people are born into it. So because that's how it became predominant, uh, that's the method God has used to set his seal on it as objective truth from him. So you can't question God's use of baptism and christening to make Christianity predominant because that's what's telling you that it's the true religion because it's predominant. So, because that method says that you can, in fact, be born a Christian, then Kierkegaard has to be wrong. Number 4, if God exists, the proof is unnecessary. And if he does not, it is impossible. So, what Kierkegaard is saying is that God would be a fact, and you don't deduce the proof of facts just from reasoning and logic. Facts simply are a state of being. They either are or they aren't. So Kierkegaard's point is if God is real, you don't have to prove he's real because he is a fact. And if he isn't real, you can't possibly give a proof. However, under superdeterminism, human thoughts are predetermined aspects of the block universe. That is, they are actual physical realities that exist in the block universe. The reason for this is take, for example, if you consciously decide to move your arm. Well, your arm is clearly a physical reality. And in a superdeterministic universe, that future arm movement has to be predetermined. And because that arm movement is predetermined, then your conscious thought to move the arm must also be predetermined in order for the arm movement to be predetermined, which means that consciousness has to be a physical reality of the predetermined block universe. So it's our brain particles, which are the physical reality in our brains, that produce consciousness. So it's the brain particles that are the physical aspect of the block universe, which leads to predetermined consciousness. So, human thoughts, like logic and reasoning, are actually physical aspects of the block universe. So, because of that, um, it is reasonable to use logic and reasoning to prove a fact like God's existence, because logic and reasoning are actual physical facts too. So there's no reason to ignore logic and reasoning in terms of a factual basis for implying the factual existence of God. Number three, live your own truth. Kierkegaard said that the most important truths that define who you are cannot be reached through reasoning. Reasoning cannot tell you why a fact should matter to you personally. So Kierkegaard was saying it's not logic and reasoning that defines who you are. It's those things that transcend logic and reasoning, the things that you are passionate about, the leap of faith into something that determines your truths. That's the closest you're going to get to the truth of who you are. So live your own truths. But there is no act of a subjective truth or subjective choosing of truth without free will on earth. So this is an impossibility. Um, Now, while superdeterminism disproves free will or freedom on earth, uh, because if you had the free will or freedom to choose something, then the future would have to be affected or determined by your choice, which means the future would have to be open and it couldn't be predetermined and already set in stone in the block universe. So, because the actions or the behavior that results from one of your decisions are already predetermined in the future, then your decision can't possibly be free. It could not have been otherwise than what is exhibited in the block universe. So you can't actually freely choose your own truths. These are all predetermined events in the block universe. Now, that being said, there is a reformulation of free will called cinematism. And cinematism is the idea that God predetermined our universe to have us exhibit choices or behavior that God already knew we would freely choose. So, because God has metaphysical knowledge of all our freely willed choices, they're hypothetical, but nonetheless, He has knowledge of our freely willed choices in all circumstances and situations, then He could create a predetermined static block universe to exhibit his knowledge of what we would freely choose, even though our actual choices on Earth aren't free. However, cinematism requires a belief in God. So one can reasonably infer that God would use cinematism because otherwise we would just be puppets on Earth, and uh, God's decision to punish some people in hell for eternity could rightly be described as unjust because they didn't have any choice in the matter of doing what they were going to do because they're just puppets. So one can reasonably infer in Christianity that God would use cinematism because he could, because God has free will and has omniscience, and he could know hypothetically what your freely willed choices would be. Number two, the self is freedom. Kierkegaard was a big believer in free will and freedom. However, under superdeterminism, there is no free will or freedom on Earth. It's an impossibility. Um, Everything that you choose, you cannot. There's no possibility that you could have chosen otherwise. Everything is predetermined. In fact, all the events from the past, present, and future still exist in the static block universe. So you can't change any of that without cause and effect in physics. So free will and freedom is an impossibility in the universe. That being said, again, of course, there is the idea of cinematism. And cinematism gets you everything that free will on Earth would otherwise get you. It's just that it's one level up to the knowledge and metaphysical understanding of God. Plus, you have to believe in God in order to get cinematism. Number one, subjectivity is the truth. So Kierkegaard thought that because objective reason is detached and disinterested, it can never grasp an essential truth which defines a person's life. Um, so reasoning and logic is very dispassionate, and it's not specifically focused on you and your identity as to who you are. So it can't really tell you anything about who you are. So Kierkegaard is saying that only uh, your own subjective, non deducted, reasoned, or logic beliefs are what define who you actually are. So it's that leap of faith into your subjective, passionate beliefs that really define who you are as a person. And that's your subjective truth. But subjectivity is an aspect of the block universe under superdeterminism. Consequently, the block universe is a more fundamental reality for truth. So, because our subjective conscious awareness is actually a physical aspect of the block universe, then the block universe itself is a more fundamental reality than consciousness. And therefore, it is a more fundamental reality for truth. Uh, but that truth from the block universe can be accessed by our conscious thoughts, because our conscious thoughts are an aspect, a physical aspect of that block reality. So while subjectivity is not the truth, the block universe is a more fundamental reality for truth. Nevertheless, our thoughts, and that includes all our thoughts, including logic and reasoning, can access the truth of the block universe because they're physical aspects of the block universe. Okay, I hope you learned something. I'll give you a second to read the board. All right, until next time, take care.